This is Elected, a podcast for women and our active accomplices in and around politics. I'm your host, Sarah Elder Cheminara, and today my guest is Dr. Jane Vermeulen. Hi, Jane.
Hello, Sarah.
Hi, it's nice to have you.
And I'm happy to be here as well. And you pronounce my name correctly, so that's always a good start. Yes.
I that's my goal is to not do that because when it happens to me, it's upsetting. So I don't want to do that to anybody else.
Yeah. So thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, you're welcome. So before we get started, it's important to me, in the spirit of reconciliation, to share my personal commitment to learning the history of colonialism and the ongoing systemic violence and oppression against Indigenous peoples. The land where I live, work, and report from is the traditional territories of the Blackfoot Confederacy, the Siksika, Kainai, Piikani, Tsuut'ina, Stoney Nakoda Nations, Métis Nation Region 3, and all people who make their homes in the Treaty 7 region of southern Alberta. And Jane, you are not in Canada. Tell me where you are.
I am right now in Columbia, South Carolina, where I moved. I arrived here July 25th, so I've been here just for over 1 month now.
Oh, wow. I haven't heard of Columbia. I think because Charleston is probably, the most known place.
Yep. Yeah.
Where is
Columbia? Columbia is more, it's considered the Midlands, so it's more kind of in the middle of the state, and it's actually the state capital. So it's the state capital, and it's also the home of the University of South Carolina. So I'm starting to learn kind of the American university collegiate life, and it's very big here.
I believe you. Yes. I mean, being Canadian, we kind of watch that culture from afar.
Yeah.
I can't imagine what it would be to experience that.
And which is what we wanted. We wanted a change of pace, and going from Victoria, British Columbia, the west coast of Canada, to South Carolina in the United States is a change of pace.
I'm really sure. And we are actually, I think we've just jumped into the conversation, but I haven't even. So for people who aren't, who don't know you, so you just moved to South Carolina, but you are a transplant. You are originally from, or you lived in Esquimalt in BC, where you served as a municipal councillor from 2018 until just very recently you stepped down so that you could move to South Carolina. And you have a long history of volunteerism. So you've volunteered with the now defunct Canadian Women's Voters Congress Campaign School. You are also a veterinarian, which is what brought you to South Carolina. You're the founder of an organization in Victoria called Vets for Pets. You're also a military spouse, a mom. It goes that's a lot.
It's been a lot, which is when I mentioned wanting to change a pace. I kind of wanted to take away some of the adjectives and descriptors that followed my name. I just want to now be veterinarian and mother and spouse.
Yeah, being a municipal councillor and a veterinarian, and a mom, a military wife, and working in the volunteering significantly with the nonprofits. That's a lot.
It was, and I managed it very well for many years. I think a lot of people don't realize, and I feel like we're just jumping right into it a bit.
Yeah, no.
Is that when you're a municipal councillor in a smaller community, so the Township of Esquimalt, it's about a population of 18,000. It is a part-time job. So that is done on top of my full-time job as a veterinarian. So I really enjoyed my time as municipal councillor. My reason for leaving, I resigned a few months early. I missed 6 meetings, was because we wanted to get our kids into school before the school year started, because we knew it was a big transition for them. And my priority is to kind of smooth it out as much as possible for the family. But when I write down all the things I've done, I lived it, but I wasn't really acknowledging it. I think it was just exhausting. And then one day I was like, and I'm done. That was basically what it came down to.
So how did you, what brought you into politics then? Because being a veterinarian and politics, I mean, those are two very different things. I will say though, I am very highly aware that the very high level veterinary associations in BC, at least when I was there and aware of it, was extremely political. But the day-to-day practice of veterinarian care is not.
Yes.
probably.
Yes. So my politics stayed primarily in the political realm. I actually was pretty involved with my veterinary association when I first started out, but more kind of in a neutral position, like doing a continuing education committee. My politics probably started at a young age because my parents were immigrants. So I was actually the first person in my family to vote in an election in Canada.
Oh,
So
wow.
I really I put a high priority on voting, and even as living here in the States, I'll be able to vote in Canadian elections because I have my Canadian passport. But I really took it seriously as someone, the first one in my family, the first and only one for a very long time to vote. So I saw the value in voting, and I feel as a woman, it's how we became individuals, how we became valued in society. Like I tell my nieces, I'm like, you got to understand, like even like 100 years ago, you didn't count. Like you were the same value as like a cow. So, voting gave us so many rights and privileges. And that kind of, I really saw the importance of that. And then it's from there kind of snowballed a bit into being actively involved. I think that people, I don't know if it's the TV shows they watch, they think that politics is like this outer realm, that it's not for the people. But when you start, volunteering on campaigns, there's such a need for volunteers, and it's like just going door knocking with the candidate. I was like, the first time I showed up in a political office to help out, like they just about pounced on me. So I got involved very, very quickly because most campaigns at pretty much all levels are very volunteer, grassroots based. So you may have that big, party platform, but at the kind of local level, all of them, federal, provincial, municipal, it's very grassroots, very volunteer run. So I had the time and energy because I was younger then to sort of just throw myself right in, and the party was appreciative of it.
So how did you make the leap then into running yourself to running and then winning to be on Esquimalt Council?
Yeah, I mean, two things. I had been supporting candidates for like 10 or 15 years, like really helping out, really in the trenches, like door to door is in the trenches, I tell people. So I was working with these candidates, really supporting them. And they'd kind of bring up like, oh, do you think, would you ever run? I'd be like, no, I can't do that. That's not for me. I think a lot of us kind of have that attitude that it's not for me. So I sort of started thinking like, maybe it was for me. Like here I'm helping all these people with their campaigns. I could do it myself. And here, being involved with Women's Campaign School, I'm encouraging other women to run, yet I don't think I can run. Like I felt a little bit like a hypocrite. We all had that same level of engagement in our community, wanting to help out, yet I didn't think I could do it while I'm encouraging other people to do it. So that was a big part, kind of just getting over my own mindset that I couldn't do it. Another big part of it, and I talk to women in particular about it, is I was at a stage and looking at kind of a political landscape where I could run and probably win. There is nothing wrong with going into politics. And I think sometimes we are afraid to say it out loud, to say that I'm going to run and I want to win. And I'm going to do the things it takes to win. And it's going to be ugly. The RIT period is 40 days. You barely sleep. You're on the go all the time. But sometimes I'll encounter women in particular, and they'll be like, oh, I'm going to run. It's an experience. I want to get my voice out there. And that's all fine. But you should also go in with the intent to win. So I kind of looked at where council was at. I thought very highly of our mayor, and I knew she was probably going to win again. And she's a very good mayor. I have a lot of respect for her, and she does a great job chairing meetings. So I'm like, this would be a great time for me to come in when there's some really great women on council, and I could run a good campaign, finally run my own campaign and win. So that was, and I did. Yeah.
And I agree with you. Winning can be, talking about winning and say, I'm running to win, can make some people, it's kind of like saying the quiet bit out loud, right? Because you keep it to yourself, and obviously I would hope that that's why you're running, is to win. Although that being said, a lot of people run for different reasons.
Yep.
Not always to win. Sometimes it's, they want to develop name recognition, or, it's not always, good intentions
Yeah.
in the way that you're not running to win. So you can actually, good intention that
I know what you're getting at.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. The intention is to represent.
Yeah.
So I get it. Yeah.
Yeah. But sometimes I feel like, so winning can be a dirty word. And then also because when you say, I'm running to win, I want people to say that, especially women. But then, there's that part of system. Well, it's, like settle down now. Don't, take it one step at a time. But then also there's the measuring of metrics and women in politics. And, is it enough to say, this many ran, but didn't win? I think the most important metric, that there have to be women running. Yes. But you also have to win.
Yes. Yeah. And I value both of those metrics. When we see how many women are running, that means, okay, how many people are engaged and putting their name on the nomination. But we also, if you don't win, you don't get to represent at whatever level of government you choose. So I really encourage women to say, you know what, it's okay to say you want to win. I mean, I live in South Carolina because after being a veterinarian for 20 years, being an associate, really kind of just sort of being told to know my place in a clinic, essentially, as an associate veterinarian. I'm like, I wanted to lead a clinic. I wanted to have a vision. I wanted to have a leadership role. And I had the opportunity came as well. Like I mentioned, running for municipal council, like I could see kind of the landscape changing, and that I would have, if I put in the work, I could win. But also, like in my veterinary career, I'm now the medical director of a veterinary specialty and emergency care clinic. So there's about 17 veterinarians here, a staff of over 70. So I wanted to advance my career now in veterinary medicine. And when I was chatting with recruiters and clinics, I was very upfront about it. Like, I want to lead a clinic. I have a vision of how I think how we can work together to kind of create a good experience for pets and pet owners. And I want to lead that. And it took me a very long time to say that, because as a veterinarian, nothing to do with politics. As a veterinarian, we're told that we do it because we love animals, which is great. I love animals, but I also had this side of my personality that wanted to lead. And now I can do that in South Carolina.
In South Carolina and South not Carolina. In Esquimalt.
Yes. Yeah.
And I would be surprised if there were any vet clinics of that size on the island.
Very few. Yeah. And I wanted to go big. And so if you want to go big, a lot of times you end up in the States.
Interesting. Yeah. So you sat on council. So Esquimalt is a pretty small municipality. Yeah. A lot of people, I think that even I didn't really understand, the Capital Regional District of on the island, and how many municipalities there are. I actually have a piece of art in my basement on the wall, and it's exact. It's obviously very small, but it shows all of the municipalities in the Capital Regional District, and there are so many. The politics of Vancouver Island, Southern Vancouver Island in the capital area, are very interesting, are very hot at times. Yeah. There are a lot of really big subjects around like emergency services and 911, police forces, duplication of services, people understanding, there's a Saanich, how many Saaniches are there, Janet?
Oh, this is like there's Central Saanich, there's Saanich, there's North Saanich.
Exactly.
I mean, my favorite is when people will email like mayor and council, and they'll just go off on something about Esquimalt and the name calling, and then you're stupid and blah blah blah, and then we'll look at their address and be like, okay, buddy, you live in Victoria, like so.
You're on the wrong side of the Blue Bridge, which you have to understand what that means.
Yeah.
There's a bridge that separates Victoria from Esquimalt, and then a little bit, but yeah.
Yes, it's
knowing where you live is important in Victoria.
I kind of tell people, like, and that's because I worked on campaigns, provincial, federal, when I was door knocking with the candidate, I'd be chatting with the residents, they would be going off on an issue that would be completely federal. And I'd be like with a municipal member. One was, I remember going with a provincial candidate and the resident was just going off on how we had to bring in the death penalty. And I'm like, I don't think that's a priority for British Columbia. So but yeah, it's door knocking is very, very interesting. But yeah, the municipal experience in Esquimalt, because the Township of Esquimalt is a population of about 18,000, but we have the Navy base, that's a big part of Esquimalt. We have a shared police force with Victoria. So a lot of different dynamics at play and a lot of egos and a lot of rules that you have to follow. A lot of residents not really being clear exactly where they live, as I mentioned, and, trying to help them out as best as possible. It was a very good experience. I don't know if I would have run again, to be completely honest, just because I knew where I was in my veterinary career. But I'm really glad I ran when I did. COVID really threw some limitations. I actually really enjoy the day-to-day interaction with people, like going, to parades and fairs. I love that stuff. That was one of my favorite things. And then when COVID hit, that was totally restricted. So that was one thing that I think was a negative part of my experience. I didn't get that fun stuff, like the parades and taking my kids. I like that kind of stuff.
The retail politics of it.
Yep. Yeah, I do. It's kind of a nice break, and people, they're not as, when we take away that face-to-face interaction, people can be pretty nasty. There's just no way around it. Whereas if you're at a fair and you're eating cotton candy, they're not as likely to, call you stupid and throw in a few other adjectives and descriptors. It's more of a fun environment. And then you get those people see you as a real person and you see them as a real person as well.
And I just want to say, because I dated myself, the Blue Bridge is actually no longer a thing. There's no longer.
It's lighted blue. So it has lighter blue. Okay. So we did, we know that people call it the Blue Bridge. So, clearly it's a Victoria thing. I had nothing to do with it, but they know that it's called the Blue Bridge. So the lights are now blue. So
good.
You can still call it the Blue Bridge.
Okay, good. I just wanted to go back because I was like, oh my gosh, I'm showing my age and my.
You can still call it Blue Bridge.
Okay. And now you live in South Carolina, where politics are, you can't vote. You're not a citizen, but you now live in a red state.
Yes. Yeah.
Did that factor into did that come into play at all when you were thinking about the politically, because Victoria and, even BC is held by, there's currently an NDP government. You have the island is, very solidly a mix of, Vancouver Island. So there's Greens provincially, NDP. There are no longer, I don't believe, any BC Liberals on the island. If that might be right or wrong. But now you live in a very different political climate. Did that factor in, going from a very kind of progressive political place to somewhere that's maybe not?
We're the city I live in, Columbia, is a state capital. So the city itself, and it has a lot of academic institutions as well. The city itself is actually more, I guess, Democrat leaning. So that did help. Part of, and I know it seems maybe people wouldn't get it. I don't say counterintuitive, but I really wanted a break from politics, and going to a place where I cannot really vote, in elections here, and maybe I'm not as politically aligned. It kind of forced me to sort of step away a little bit. We don't see, South Carolina as our forever home. So I'm 47. I don't know if I'll live here to 87. I'm not sure what the opportunities will look like, but it did factor in, because I am a feminist and I am very heavily involved in politics. And I was like, can I live here? But I came here to focus more on veterinary medicine and my family. And this was one way for me to maybe kind of push the politics out for a little bit. So is to go to a place where, these are very different politics for me.
Yeah, definitely. Well, yeah. And not being able to vote, that's a very significant thing. Obviously you can still vote in Canadian elections. Yeah. But living in a place where you can't vote, but still be opinionated. Maybe that's the
Yes.
sweet spot.
Yeah, I know. It'll be interesting. Although it's funny, maybe it's just because right now I've only been here for 1 month. We don't really talk politics much. So I've enjoyed that, being in veterinary medicine, like being full-time, like really focusing. I'm kind of happy to have a little bit of a break from sort of the hot topics in BC. BC, it's every province has its issues, but we had our catastrophic flooding, the fires, like it was a bit exhausting. And then living on the island, that the transportation, it was trying to get off the island was so difficult, and it's gotten so much worse. And I was getting very, very claustrophobic. So we wanted to move someplace where we can just road trip. So I can be in Atlanta, Georgia in 4 hours. I can be in Charleston in 2 hours. I can be at Washington, D.C. in 6.5 hours. So that actually was kind of a big thing. We wanted to just be able to hop in a car and drive somewhere and not get stopped because we have to go on a ferry.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a big part of living on the island is, you really are restrained because you can only drive so far before you hit water.
Yeah.
And there are no bridges to Vancouver Island.
Yep.
So it's ferry
Plane.
or plane, essentially. So, it is hard to get off. So now you are no longer locked in that way.
Yes, which was very, very exciting. Yeah, that was a big thing, and that's partially why we didn't want to live on the West Coast, because we had toured so much of the West Coast. Like we wanted a significant change in life and culture and pace. So South Carolina is pretty much on the top of the list to kind of hit those requirements.
I'm sure it is. Esquimalt to Columbia, South Carolina. That's a very big one.
It is.
So in terms of stepping down, and BC is going into municipal elections very soon.
Yes.
So did they fill your seat, or did they just keep it open?
No. And my move to South Carolina, it didn't happen overnight. The council members knew where I was heading in my career and life. So we knew kind of the time frame. My last day on council, I think, was July 15th. And then we went into a month-long summer break where we wouldn't have had council meetings anyways. And then election day is October 15th. So there would have, I think in total, I missed 6 meetings. But truthfully, kind of those last meetings, maybe, they're not as hot button issues, those last few meetings. So the timing worked out that we didn't feel the need to fill my seat. I don't think I would have left if I thought it was going to trigger a by-election. Okay. So I was quite strategic. And I know people that have left for other opportunities and it's triggered a by-election, and those were their choices, and I understand why they did it, but I didn't want to. Like, that was very important to me. I didn't want to have to require my council and the residents to go through a by-election with, say, 7 months to go or something like that. So we had quorum. We knew that we were going into summer break. So and we knew it was planned in advance. So there wasn't a big surprise. It was still sad though. Like, this was something I had wanted to do for a very long time, and like to say goodbye to it I was a little bit teary-eyed.
Do you think that there will be more people stepping down because of the challenges of COVID over the last 2 years, or stepping back in some way?
I can't speak on behalf of everyone. I did find that COVID made people a little bit crankier in terms of, how they were emailing. And I don't necessarily know how council was before COVID because I wasn't on it. But even in the time when I started council, when we weren't during COVID and the restrictions during my time in it, and when people would have to come to a public hearing, they would have to stand in front of us and say their piece and stand, with their fellow residents. There was a bit more of a tone of like respect, I think, and that, it's not easy to name call someone when they're standing 6 feet away from you. So I find that COVID maybe brought out a nastier side in a lot of people that was a bit exhausting. I would open up my emails, and I tell this story where, I have several email accounts, and I went into one email account that I thought was just my personal email, and I just opened it up because it went to me, and the person just starts off by, with name calling and stuff like that. I'm like, whoa, what email am I in? And then I realized I had accidentally opened up my council account. So, but once public hearings came back, I kind of joked like that. I was happy to have people in council chambers. I liked seeing people and hearing them talk and get their opinions. So I think that in a sense made it a bit harder because I saw things coming back where people had to come in person. But I think COVID, it just burnt out people in so many capacities. And then when you had, I had young children, I was trying to school them, being a veterinarian, like right now in British Columbia, we are in a severe veterinary shortage. It's called a crisis now, essentially. So having to work so much, and I work in emergency medicine, and people, having wait times of 10 to 12 hours to see a veterinarian. So I think it all just piled on. That's probably the best way to say it. It all just piled on. And I'm like, you know what? I'm just gonna leave it all in a sense.
Well, I mean, we're also seeing that in the human medical field as well. But it's interesting because the animal side of it isn't something that's in part of the conversation right now, just because of the acute lack of family doctors in BC. As well as, kind of an exodus of people from healthcare because of the last couple of years. And so there's a real problem. I know, I'm not sure if you saw it before you left, but there was actually a woman in Victoria who had put an ad in her paper saying, like, I need a doctor to be able to prescribe my elderly husband's prescription. Is there anyone out there who can help me? That's dire.
Oh yeah, and I follow. I mean, you can take me out of Esquimalt, but you can't take the Esquimalt out of me. So I still read like the CBC probably 5 times a day, and the Times Colonist and the Vic News, because I have friends in politics as well, and I want to know what's going on. But the crisis on the human side is big, and it was interesting because they question my decision to move to the United States all the time. It's a bit exhausting, actually. And a lot of times it comes up with healthcare. And I tell people, like, we do have universal healthcare. There was no question. Canada has universal healthcare. We just can't access it, though. Like, that's the problem. Like, great, we have it, but it's not accessible. My dad is 81 years old and he doesn't have a doctor anymore. And he's probably on 4 or 5 meds and has significant chronic illnesses. So he doesn't have access to healthcare. So my children don't have really good access to healthcare. So the crisis on the human side is dire. On the veterinary side, it was because during the pandemic, so many people got pets. Like, it was just people in my life who never expressed any interest in having animals suddenly have dogs and cats and rabbits and fish, and they all needed care. And there's kind of 2 things. They're used to veterinarians always being there, but they're used to not really having to pay for their health care. So now they're having to pay for their pets' health care. So they can't understand why it costs, $500 to spay a dog. So that would be a little bit exhausting as well, because we don't really put a price tag on medicine. But where I live in Victoria, the cost of living is so high. Like, it is just, I don't want to say unrelenting, but it is unfathomable at times. So when I think of, we just sold our house in Esquimalt and we're buying a house in Columbia, like, we're going from a small townhouse to a large 5-bedroom house. Like, with a significant price difference. So I think for me as a veterinarian, that played a big part too. Like, I'm very upfront. I get paid significantly more in South Carolina, and the cost of living is significantly less.
Well, I think anyone who's ever seen an episode of House Hunters understands the difference in the cost of real estate. Because, you're like, wow, a 4-bedroom house that's 3,000 square feet and has a 2-acre backyard and is $299,000. I'm just making that up off the top of my head.
It's pretty accurate, though. It's pretty accurate.
You're like, wow, you can get a lot of real estate for it is a very different thing. So and I do think that those kinds of things matter, and to be honest about it and talk about, and to people, living in BC is becoming really difficult.
It is. Yep.
I was recently in BC and there was a condo for sale that I saw. It was a 1-bedroom with possibly a den that you could use as a 2nd bedroom. And it was almost $800,000 Canadian.
Yeah. And that's what was happening. And we lived very, very urban. Like we lived in a townhouse, on a bus route. And we were fine with it. But as our kids got older, they had a desire for a yard. Like we moved there in 2018 and we were okay not really having a yard because we would go to the rec center, we would go to the parks, we would go to the library. So it was okay with the children. But then when the pandemic hit, we couldn't really go anywhere. Yeah. So my kids had a parking lot, essentially. That's what we had. We had a parking lot. And I know that for a lot of people, and I lived it for a very long time and we were very happy with it, but I wanted to have something different. Like I knew that I can go back to Victoria. I can always go back. But my kids are kind of at that age in life, 9 and 6, where they hadn't really established big relationships yet or connections where we could move them. And they still have that excitement for like kind of a sense of adventure.
Well, maybe if you're ever in the market for moving back to Canada, you can come to Alberta.
I was born in Alberta.
Oh,
yes. So, I was born in St. Albert, and then I spent quite a part of my childhood in Edmonton, and then I did and then I have friends in Calgary as well, and then I did my vet school training in Saskatoon, obviously not Alberta, but still the prairies. So, I think if I have a desire to have cold temperatures, yes, I will head that way again.
Yeah, right now you're, I would say, in the more tropical part of the world in North America. So you don't need a parka anytime soon.
No. It's funny when we were packing because I arrived just with 2 suitcases. I did not bring any. I brought one small jacket. That's it. Yeah.
Oh, that sounds so fabulous because winter is very quickly coming here. And obviously winters in Esquimalt are, I would also describe as somewhat tropical compared to Alberta. I really miss them. I will just say. But you're definitely experiencing a different life, and I think it's great, and I'm really happy for you. And people need to do what they need to do, and also, I mean, the feminist aspect of why you moved to the States is, it's I applaud that as well. Like you
and one thing when I chat with people about the decision, there are very few things we commit to that are forever.
Yeah.
So that's kind of like people are like, I can't believe you're moving. I'm like, I've lived in California. I've lived in White Rock. I've lived in Vancouver. I've lived in Saskatoon. I've lived on Vancouver Island. It's not forever. Like you can move. If it doesn't work out for some reason down the road, then we move again. So I kind of encourage people like, maybe you're going to fall flat. Like maybe it's not going to work out, but life will go on. Like that's, if for me, if the worst thing is that I decided to advance my veterinary career, we moved to South Carolina, we had a great time. I loved my job. And then, 5 years later, we're like, you know what, it's time to head back to Canada. If that's the worst thing that came out of it, that's not a bad thing.
Yeah, it's true. And I think it's also a good reminder that you can run and win in politics. Yeah. And then you can leave.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And that's, it's come up before, like chatting people with kind of my EDAs, like they're like, oh, we thought you were going to run provincially or federally. And I'm like, maybe I will down the road. Like I still have time. I'm 47, I still have time in the future if I wanted to, but right now this is the opportunity here for me. And there was another councillor on Esquimalt Council who had paused her political career for 3 or 4 years and then went back. So we see that it can happen. So it's not like once you go down that political track, you don't have to stay on it forever. You can go back and forth, or maybe you stay on it for 6 years and you're like, I'm done, or maybe you stay on it for 20 years and you're done. But don't feel like, I think people thought when I was running municipally that I was completely committing my life to politics forever. And I wasn't. I'm a veterinarian. I have another job. I was committing my life to politics during this time period, and then I may go back. I'm not sure yet.
I like it. And I think that's an important message for people to hear. It doesn't have to be forever. You can make it whatever you want it to be.
Yeah. I mean, I strongly encourage people. And if the worst for me running for council and winning is I was a municipal councillor for the Township of Esquimalt. Like that's what came out of it. And then I decided, you know what, it's time to look at another part of my life and I'll do that.
Well, I think that is very exciting, and I'm so happy that we got the chance to connect, and I'm excited for your life in South Carolina. Yes. And I mean, I'm envious that you get to see like well, I hope, they're not in great distress, but you get to,
Yeah.
you get to work with animals, and you're
Yes.
following your passion,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
you are still very political, just in a different way.
Completely. And I will always support women who are running in politics. That part has never changed, which is partially why, I reached out to you, because I am a strong supporter of that. I actually wear the clothes from Madam Premier as well. So that was a big part as well. I love seeing people's reactions to the shirts I wear and stuff like that. So I think right now I may step back a little bit and just go back to encouraging women to run.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there needs to be more of that in the States as well.
Yes.
And you can continue to wear Madam Premier in the States.
I will.
The messages still apply. You still need to elect women.
Yeah.
And their midterm elections are coming up very quickly. So anyways,
it's going to be very, very interesting being here right now. Very, very interesting political times. And I'm kind of happy to maybe be a little bit more of an observer and take a breather from it.
Yeah. Well, I wish you all the best. Congratulations on making a move, and for making politics work for you in a way that, it doesn't have to be forever. And maybe we'll see you again on the political stage sometime in BC.
Yeah, that is my hope at some point in time. So thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you, Jane.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.